My name is Holly Amato, and today I have Sean Cleland, an attorney and mediator, with me today on the Onward and Upward show. Sean's been practicing law for almost 30 years and has a collaborative approach to family law. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sean. So excited to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Holly. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we're getting into that part of the year, though, where I think you're going to be happy because spring is here. And I'm wondering when you're scheduling that first hike of the season, since I know you love the great outdoors.
3 days.
No way. Where are we going?
Yes. We're going to Kentucky. I have always wanted to check out the Red River Gorge area of Kentucky. It's just a little bit east of Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
And it's got an absolute ton of hiking trails. I'm taking my daughters with me in case this old man falls down on the trails. They can pick me up and help me out. But it's going to be a lot of fun.
I love that. All right, so you're a girl dad.
Yes. Yep. I have two of them, and they like to hike and
Yes.
canoe. So
That's
I'm
nice.
training them so when I can't paddle a boat anymore, they'll be able to paddle for me as well. So far, so good.
Listen, that's what kids are for. They're like built in whatever you need, right? We've trained them up,
Yes,
and now it's their turn. I love that.
exactly.
I
Yep.
love that. Okay, well, that's going to be fun, and you'll have to keep me posted on that. And I'm really excited to dive into our conversation today because as someone who is divorced, I know the toll it takes on a person and a family. And, typically we'd be looking at attorneys fighting for their respective clients, many trips to the courthouse for hearings, depositions. But with your approach to mediating divorce, I think we'll be able to offer an option that's much more positive and really utilizes time and finances better, getting everyone on the same page. So Sean, what made you decide to go in the direction of mediating and collaborative divorce rather than litigating it?
Well, I have experience about divorce from my own childhood.
Mm.
And so I have, thought a lot about divorce even before I became a lawyer. And, when I became a lawyer, divorce law is out there. I thought, I would have some talent in helping people in, going through a divorce with my legal expertise that I added on at that point. The thing was that I really noticed that the way that divorces are handled in the courts just did not seem right to me. It felt wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to describe, but I think your character is molded a bit by divorce. I think I kind of became a little bit of a mediator between my parents almost. And so when I would handle a divorce, what I really wanted to do is I wanted to find a solution with opposing counsel. Hey, let's just figure this out together. We can be the adults in the room if we have to be, and really work on getting this whole thing resolved. And, basically it didn't work really well in litigation. And then I found collaborative practice. I started reading about alternative methods like mediation. I took training on mediating years ago, and I just had an epiphany that this is a great avenue to help people, and it really suits my personality. It suits my strengths as an attorney, and it's worked out great.
Okay. And I love that. And I'm excited for people to explore that avenue. And I noticed, on your website, which is amazing, you have a lot of resources there and a blog and so many things. I noticed that there's a differential between mediation and the collaborative divorce process. So I'm wondering if you can kind of give us, maybe it's just semantics, but what is the difference between the two?
Yeah. So when I talk with people about what I do, oftentimes people get referred to me. They already kind of know that I'm specializing in something about getting divorced out of court, but they really don't know what that means. And so I'll walk them through, what these methods actually do, how they work in practical terms. And so I will tell people really that they're very much alike.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're solution oriented. They're trying to create a process that's built around your needs as a couple, as a family. But the main distinctions between the two are as follows. In collaborative practice, you're going to have your own attorney with you the whole time. You're going to have one attorney for one spouse and one for the other. Now, those attorneys are working towards a mutually acceptable resolution to the divorce. The difference with mediation is that I'm not acting as an attorney, and the couple doesn't absolutely have to have attorneys if they don't want to, and they're not really involved in the process. I'm just a neutral between the two people. So often in mediation, it's me and the couple, so 3 people, whereas in collaborative practice, it's 4. Every time you have a meeting, it's 2 attorneys and the spouse. And so does either of the people in the marriage, do either one of them need to have a person next to them the whole time? Do they need to have a person with them every step of the way? that's like a legal representative, collaborative practice is going to be appropriate for that person. If you're someone who doesn't need an attorney full time with you, then you probably can use mediation. So it's a comfort level. And, there's a cost associated with that too,
Sure.
as I tell people, because you're paying for two attorneys in collaborative, whereas in mediation, you don't necessarily have to. And it can be cheaper even if you do bring attorneys into mediation.
Okay. So on the collaborative process, you function as one of the attorneys and then the other spouse gets their own attorney. Is that how that works? I'm assuming you've
Yes.
got to have that conversation with the other attorney to say, this is a different process. We're not going to go at it with each other. We're going to be more of like just coming to the table, like you said, being solution based.
Right. So when you start a collaborative case, what will happen here is one spouse will retain a collaboratively trained attorney. Now, it's important to note that they have to be trained in collaborative practice. You can't just hire any attorney who says, oh, yeah, I'm a very collaborative person. Well, it's not a personality test. It's an actual training and a specialty. And so these attorneys are people who, in my experience, they do think of their role as finding a mutually acceptable resolution. Whereas you just pick an attorney off the corner who may do, divorce work and criminal work. They don't necessarily see it as their job to try and find a resolution to the divorce. They're just trying to better the leverage for their spouse and let someone else worry about resolving it. But in collaborative, I come in, I'm representing one spouse. The other spouse is represented by another collaboratively trained attorney. And then we sign an agreement called a participation agreement where the couple will tell their attorneys that your job is to find a mutually acceptable resolution to the divorce. And so that allows the attorneys to work together. And the whole object is to find a way to get both of the spouses to find a mutually acceptable resolution rather than, trying to leverage someone and get more for their client.
Right. Okay. So would you say that there are some instances where people come to you and you can tell that maybe this won't work? What would be like, what is your process for that? I'm assuming maybe an intake appointment or, how do you determine, because everything isn't for everyone, right? And there might be some people that you think, this may not be the right option for them. What does that look like when you're kind of deciding if the process is going to work for everybody?
Yeah, usually the biggest obstacle to getting started with either any out of court divorce method, whether it's mediation or collaborative practice, is that it takes two to tango. They both have to agree up front that they want to do either method. You can't force someone to mediate. You can't force someone to try collaborative practice. The only method to get a divorce where you can literally drag the other spouse into the divorce without their consent is to do it the normal way through a court system based approach, where you hire an attorney, they file a complaint, they serve it on the other spouse. So that's the first thing I tell people is that it's a voluntary process. So you have to be able to communicate upfront about the process. If you can't communicate about the rest of your divorce, so be it. I'm there to help. But if you can at least discuss that you don't want to go through the courts, that you'd like to try and do this as amicably as possible, then we have an opportunity to get something done. And so oftentimes that's the real roadblock is that point. Can you do that or can you not?
Mm-hmm.
Then past that point, are there certain cases where I would say you're not appropriate for mediation or collaborative practice? I absolutely do. And those would be where there's, abuse, physical or a lot of emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, everyone knows in marriage, if people get upset, they're going to raise their voices, maybe say some things they don't want. So I'm not talking about your everyday things with that, but I am talking about where one spouse feels intimidated by the other. So they couldn't really have an equal place at a discussion table without feeling intimidated. So that's one for sure. The other one is there has to be some level of trust.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some, because if one spouse is really concerned that the other spouse isn't disclosing everything, isn't being truthful about where the assets are, things of that nature,
Right.
Sometimes it's that lack of trust is really hard to overcome because it produces a lot of anxiety in one of the spouses. So that's another roadblock where I tell people, you need to have at least some of this trust. There are some things we can do to alleviate that anxiety, but we have to have some acknowledgement that you're comfortable enough trusting the other spouse to at least not be hiding, tons of gold in the Bahamas during the divorce process.
Right. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about that. So let's say that situation was, let's say one of the spouses said, I know that there's assets in other places and they wanted to put something in writing to discovery. I know I'm not using the words properly, but to pull that information. Is that something they can still do in the collaborative process? Or is this just, like you said, coming to put together the actual divorce plan?
Yeah. So in collaborative or in mediation, we don't have subpoena power. I can't force someone to give me information. I can't go to a bank or an employer and subpoena them and acquire information. We don't, do a forensic background check. In fact, I tell people that it's not my role to make sure that I've turned the other spouse upside down and, shook their pockets empty. So, but there are some things we can do that are quite effective. And in my experience, in most cases are equally effective. And that is if you have a spouse who's really concerned about the assets, and because some spouses just don't know what they have. I mean, one spouse did all the checkbook work. They paid all the bills, and maybe one's got a finance background, the other one doesn't. It's fine. But in those situations, one spouse feels in the dark, and that produces anxiety about what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So for those people, I will bring in a person called a certified divorce financial analyst to work with me in the mediation. One is almost always used in collaborative practice, and that person collects all the documentation, collects all the information so that they have a full assessment of everything on the financial table for the spouses. And they're able to tell the other spouse, hey, I need this additional information. You need to get this for me. They might notice if something's missing. And of course, if they don't voluntarily produce it, then we're probably going to end the mediation or the collaborative case. So getting the experts involved in those situations, I think alleviates a lot of those issues. We also could enter into like status quo agreements when we start either one of these, a collaborative case or a mediation, where both spouses sign an agreement saying that they're going to pay the bills the way they always have, and they'll have to agree if they're going to spend more than, say, $500 in any one item before they'll spend that money, so that there's some control on how the assets are being used before the divorce is final.
Okay. So that's a lot of peace of mind, I think, knowing that, because I know for me, obviously, I work with people getting divorced and selling their homes. And I think probably one of the biggest assets most people have is their home. And I love that you're bringing in that financial person. I know they also use a tool called a quadro sometimes, that qualified domestic relations order, because in my experience and working just from the real estate side, usually a lot of times it's women who are a little more partial to, or sentimental, if we will say, especially if they have kids, to the home. But I think it's a great tool to make sure they look at if there are other assets. Sometimes people say, I'll just take the house and you take these accounts, but they're not equal. These aren't equal assets. So I think sometimes when you're going through that process, it's really important to have somebody that can speak to that and really say to them, hey, you might want to get this evaluated because they're not equal. Like we've seen house prices go up, we see them come down. We know that some of these other tools for financial accounts, more steady incline maybe. So I'm glad to hear that there is something for that and in place for that. Yeah.
Absolutely, Holly. And in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because a house is always one of the biggest issues in a divorce. And it's always an issue about whether or not one spouse wants to keep the house, especially with interest rates increasing in recent years. We see more and more people wanting to keep their existing mortgage rather than refinancing. And that involves a whole host of issues that involve future risk that we really have to work through and make sure that people make an informed decision. I mean, my role as a mediator is to make sure that they think through all the options. They think through all the downsides of every decision as best I can, either by myself or with an expert who I can bring in, like a CDFA. But there is a person that I've been using a lot in either collaborative cases or in mediations who's actually a lending expert in divorces. They specialize in divorce lending issues, who can assist people in, not buying a home, but in qualifying for a mortgage, for example, during the divorce process. How can they set up the divorce agreement so that when they're done with it, they're in a position where they'll be able to qualify for a mortgage? Or if there's co-ownership of a home post-divorce, that co-ownership won't affect them in their endeavor to get a home after their divorce is final. That's an extremely important part of the process. And so again, it's having this team of experts that cover those issues that really separates out of divorce concepts from in divorce concepts, because we're working on their day one post-divorce future during the process. We're not telling them to figure it out when the divorce is final. So these experts in real estate are really a vital part of it.
Sean, this is music to my ears. You have no idea, because Sometimes, and it depends when people come to us in the process too, because sometimes they'll come when it's too late, the divorce is already final, and they've got the judgment that's really states what it states. And sometimes they have to go back and redo some things because the way that it was written, one person's not going to be able to buy. It might have looked
Correct.
good on paper, but the biggest issue that we're seeing right now, you already hit the nail on the head. It's the rate. Most people who've had their home for a few years, they refinanced in 2020, 2021, and they're at like a 3% interest rate. And now we're at like 6.5 on a good day. So asking them to refinance or even just to pull that money out to pay off the other spouse and use the house as the asset, it's a huge thing, and it really does affect people in a really big way. So you mentioned having a team, and I've been really big on a team. I really believe when you're getting divorced, you need a team. You need your attorney or your legal representation, whatever that process is. Like you've mentioned, great different options. Your real estate agent who needs to understand the market and know what to help you with. And then the lending partner is great because they do have some options. If you are the displaced spouse, you can qualify as a first-time home buyer, even though the rule typically is you have to not have owned a home for 3 years. They'll let you do that. So there's so many things people don't know. And I appreciate and applaud you for bringing those people in, because it's not just about getting it done. It's about really helping people, like you said, the first day after, moving forward and rebuilding. It's important.
Correct. It is. And that's really what distinguishes what I do from what your normal divorce process is, is that we're there to make you think through everything before the divorce is final. So you're ready post-divorce life. That's a completely different concept. And it does pay the dividends because you're ready from day one after the divorce is final to live your life. And, for families who have children, it's vital. Because, everyone wants their children to adjust to divorce. It's a difficult thing to do. But the number one factor in helping your children adjust to the divorce is if the parents adjust well to the divorce. And what's the biggest factor in helping parents adjust to a divorce is making sure you're not panicked the day after the divorce is final because you don't know how to make ends meet. You know what you've got, but you know how any of it fits together. So that's why these out-of-court divorce processes, they involve a lot of work because you got to think through your future. But the dividends are pretty limitless. And people like you that are there to help people like this are part of the team we need.
Absolutely. We definitely need a team. And I like that you just brought up the situation with kids. So I know there's been some changes. It used to be 6 months if you had underage kids, minimum of 6 months for a divorce. Now I believe that there's a way around that potentially. And I'd love to hear different time frames. Obviously, everybody's different. There's not a one size fits all always. But what would you say the average time frame would be when somebody steps into a collaborative divorce process and they're actually working together as much as possible to that end?
Yeah, a lot of it depends greatly on the complexity of the case, right? For spouses who are just a short-term marriage, few assets, no children, out of that process, it could be maybe a month before they have a settlement agreement. And at that point, without children, they wait 60 days. So it could be maybe a grand total. For people who have more complex assets and children, it does take longer. And it depends on how quickly they can move through those issues. So I would say on a very rough thumbnail sketch of how long it takes on average, non-scientific opinion, it's going to take some people about 4 to 6 months, and I'd say on average, to work through those issues. Then they sign a settlement agreement once they've come to an agreement on all those issues. And it's once we have a settlement agreement signed, which is a contract between the couple about how they're going to resolve all the issues from parenting time to the property disposition. Then they file with the court a joint petition for divorce. Then the court will make you wait 60 days, and then you can have your divorce final. The courts will waive the 6-month provision, especially when they've worked things out of court with one of these methods, and because they already know that they've been working on the divorce for some time, so they're more than willing to waive the whole 6 months, but they are going to make you wait 60 days from the date of filing. So I would say that, negotiations might take 4 months, but maybe 5, maybe 6, and then you're looking at waiting an additional 2 months for the divorce is final. So I would say on average, you're looking probably around 6 to 8 months to have a finalized divorce. Can be quicker. It varies.
Okay. That sounds great. Because I know most people that I know, including myself, it was not that fast. But we all went the traditional route. And, what they typically do in the traditional route, which I know is you get to a place where they almost threaten you with mediation. So everyone, I think that's been through divorce, they hear that word mediation. It's like maybe they have like a visceral, like post-traumatic stress reaction to mediation. But I like that we're talking about it in a positive way where it just means that we're coming together for a resolution to try to take some of that edge off and stress off. And it's not War of the Roses anymore. We're looking at,
Right.
let's resolve this. Now, is this on Zoom? I'm assuming. How does this work? Do you go to the courthouse? Where's everybody meeting? What does that look like when you're going through the process?
Yeah, so there's obviously there's no problem with meeting in person, but I just find that with my practice, I'm doing everything via Zoom.
Okay.
It just seems to be really convenient for people. Most of my meetings, or frankly, all of my meetings nowadays are, weekday evenings. They're going to be weekends, and because people don't want to have to, take break from their workday or take vacation day to talk about these things. It's difficult to be at work with all that emotion on the table sometimes. So it really works out. So Zoom is really convenient for people.
I love that because it is really inconvenient when you get the mailing that says you have to be at court Tuesday morning at 10:45. It's like, how many times can you keep taking off work? The average person, for all these meetings and things, it could be a real issue trying to keep your work schedule together. Like you just mentioned, your emotions are, all over the place. And that's a huge challenge in and of itself, depending on how many times you're being summoned to go to court and how contentious it can get. So I like that option that it's outside of the work schedule. Just doing that and knowing that you're not going to receive something in the mail that's forcing you to get there at a certain day and a certain time, and you have to rearrange your life or your schedule with the kids, or who's going to take them to baseball or whatever the thing is. Just that is taking out a lot of stress. Huge.
It is. And it fits my ethic. I mean, my ethic of doing mediations and collaborative practice is to build a divorce process around the couple. Courts have their own ethics. They have their own system, their own reasons why they do things. They're not built around the people getting divorced. And so as part of that, why not build a structure that works around their schedules and makes it more convenient for them? These are people whose lives are turned upside down, and they have children. They still got to keep that composed face for the kids as best they can. So they need this kind of support. They don't need to be called into court and taking days off. And so anything you can do to make it better for the people is really what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, and they say that the top 5 stressors and the most stressful situations you can go through, I think divorce is number 3. It's definitely in the top 5. And anything that you can do to alleviate that and to change that for people, I think is huge. And I think it's worth it. Again, we started out talking about saving time, which it sounds like you're able to do, and just alleviating that, a big part of that stress, which is the unknown. When am I going to have to go? What's going to happen to me? It's almost like you're kind of, you're handing your life over to the court. And like you said, they don't care. I've been through the process. They have so many things going on. They have so many people coming to them. I remember my attorney telling me, they kind of look at divorce as a nuisance. They look at it like, you couldn't work out your stuff and now we have to. Their focus is always on the kids, which is where it should be, of course, what's best for these kids. But you are being pushed through a process. You're letting go of control. And I think, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, I think that causes some of the worst to come out in people because nobody likes to feel like they're not in control or they're being forced through something that they're already not happy about.
Right. I agree with that. I mean, I tell people all the time when they say, what's the real difference between working it out in court and out of court? And I tell people, if you're going to handle your divorce in court, you're playing a board game you've never played before. And you're hiring an attorney because he's played that game a lot. So he's moving your little pawn around that board for you. He's doing all the talking. He knows what's going on. And you probably don't have a really good opinion about what's going on or good background. So that alone, it's the fact that you're letting someone else be your mouthpiece causes a lot of friction because, as you know, even online, if people don't know who you're talking to and they're hiding behind a fake name, you can say all sorts of things. And because you're not there saying it to the other spouse, you're not really putting yourself out there. So in mediations, you're having conversations and in collaborative practice directly with your spouse. You're not going through a middle person. And that makes all the difference in the world because it gets people to really understand the other side's thoughts and their concerns, and they get to see it on their face rather than having to talk through an attorney where the language is going to be so different. So it's that kind of difference, I think, that really makes divorce court difficult for people and makes out-of-court solutions a really good one for other people.
Right. And I'd love to kind of talk about maybe what's new in divorce, right? Like, so I was divorced 12 years ago, and 2012. I'm like, wait a minute, what year was it? 2012. And back then, it was just starting to be a thing where they were looking at more 50-50 custody. Before, it was typically, kids were going with their mom for that 80-20. And that's actually where mine ended up, because we didn't actually disagree on that. But I've been really hearing and seeing that there's more of there's more working towards giving that 50-50. Maybe there's more of both spouses wanting 50-50. The devil's advocate, you've got people who are saying, oh, well, this one only wants have time with the kids because it's going to change their child support. So there's a lot with that conversation. I think, that people go back and forth, that I remember where, that's a big deal, the custody issue. And does this person really want the kids, or, do they really just not want to pay the child support? But I'd love to hear your idea on maybe that. And also if there's anything else that you've noticed where the court system or the collaborative process is being more proactive in different areas of the divorce process.
Yeah, so from the custody issue you talked about, it really is about the same as it always has been. The courts really are trying to push more for 50-50 time if both of them want it. Now, they are going to look to see if one spouse really is capable of handling that, if one is traveling constantly, or if they live too far away to make that really work out, practically speaking, to get the children to one school. But they are going to push for, unless you can give a reason why that's not appropriate. So I think that is firmly in place. And there are people who do take advantage of that because they just want to pay lower child support. And that's why they want 50-50. And so for those people, oftentimes I'll talk to people who have been divorced for some time, and they'll say, well, we agreed to 50-50, but in practice, I have the children, 85% of the time. And sometimes those spouses don't go and try and make a change with the court saying, this isn't 50-50 and I'm not getting what I deserve from child support. And those people probably should be proactive in going to court to make an adjustment to child support. I would say that for sure. Usually in mediation or collaborative practice, we're able to work out the custody arrangement really around what's the true ability of the parents to take care of the children on a daily basis. And we're able to work out some agreements with people that you probably couldn't do in court because you're able to get to a level of detail because you have time that the attorneys and the judges just don't have to work through. So we'll get more detailed in our agreement. So that is a help. But there are some parents who have a lot of trouble with trying to figure out how to make their families work, whether they're trying to bird nest or they have a lot of children or their work commitments are so all encompassing. It's difficult to figure out how to schedule it. You can even bring in a parenting time coordinator into any of these processes to work with the parents, to meet with separately, to try and work through these issues and to act as a coach. There are going to be issues that come up after the divorce is final. It's inevitable.
Right.
So how do you work through those after the divorce? Well, having someone, a resource like that you can always go to rather than a judge or an attorney, but go to someone who can help people as a professional to work through how to, deal with changed circumstances. That's really helpful. And it gives a real strong feeling of control and the fact that a family isn't broken after a divorce. It's just changed. And I think that's really empowering for parents.
Absolutely. I like that you said that too, because I think we have to change the way that we talk about divorce. And families aren't broken, they're just reorganized. We can give it a different name, but it's affecting, it used to be like 65% of the population. I have no idea where that number is now, but there's a lot of people going through it. It's definitely a part of society that needs to get addressed. Some of the stigmas around being divorced, I just think those are antiquated. We need to work towards, it's all about education. It's all about, and it sounds like what you're doing with bringing in, I like, again, the team. You've got maybe a divorce coach, or you said a parenting coach, people that are coming in to really serve the family so that they can move forward and have more peace and have just, how are we moving forward in this aftermath of what we're doing? What would you say, if there was one thing or maybe a couple of things or whatever your thoughts are on, if you could maybe wave a magic wand and people would all understand something about divorce, the process, what you do, what do you feel like maybe you wish that people understood, or maybe that you have to work harder to get that across? to people?
Yeah. So, for me, it's just people today still have, I mean, if you think of all the institutions we have in this country, over the centuries, the one institution that I find that people have almost, they're still kind of fogged a little bit by the myth of what a court system is. People tend to think that the court system is far more efficient than it actually is. It's far better able to help people in their specific case. Like they think if they go before a judge, that judge is going to know everything about them. And it's not the judge's fault. These people are the hardest working people I know. And these people in the court, the administrations, they work their tails off. This is not to blame them for the fact that they can't do that. They can't give your situation, your family, your future anywhere near the amount of time that it requires to do this wisely. So, but people still have this kind of thinking about the courts as being, oh, well, it's justice and it's they know what they're doing and I'll get justice from the court. When people go through the process, most people don't feel that way. And that's what I really wish people would wake up to, that court system really is not appropriate for most divorces. I think that if you really had people look at this with their eyes wide open, that most people should use out-of-court divorce methods. And the smaller amount of cases should use in-court divorces when you have these specific circumstances of, lack of trust or assets or abuse, things of that nature. Then courts play a fantastic role because they can protect people. So that's really what I wish they would know. I wish they would know better what they were getting into. But the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes people go into things and they learn. And that's what I would say.
Well, that's brilliant. And as you're talking, I heard my friend's voice and she said something once, and it's the best advice. She's like, Holly, nobody cares about you. And it sounds harsh when you hear that. It's not that people don't care about you. It's that they can't, it's like, and when people have so much going on in their lives and everyone's going in a different direction. So you look at this process of divorce, these judges are overloaded with the caseload. Like I said, if it's true about 60% of the population is going through this, their caseload is overloaded. And they don't just come one time, right? They're coming multiple times and people aren't showing up and they're frustrating these judges, I'm sure. So exactly what you just said, everything you just said, I really want to highlight that, because if people did follow your process and they tried to handle it on their own, and even if they can't, you come to a place where like, yeah, this has to get litigated, that's fine. But if they could just if they can somewhat get on the same page and allow this process, they're going to save some time and money. Who doesn't want to save that? And the truth about divorce is you're going to end up where you're going to end up. It's not like this person's going to get it's going to go down the same path, typically, most of the time. So wouldn't that be great to alleviate this burden on the court system to only do, the percentage that you feel, these need litigation? Because again, not everybody's going to be able to go through this process. Well, that sounds like a great utopian world. Besides not getting divorced at all, right? Besides everybody being able to
Correct.
work things out, which is, of course, I know, and I know your heart would be for that to be the case. But when it's not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would say that, it is utopian in the sense, but in a way it is changing. I do believe that the culture around divorce is changing. I mean, our legal system has changed, and that, I think it's been since about 2017, it's now allowing couples to file for divorce together in a joint petition process. So no one has to be a plaintiff or defendant or be served with a complaint or any of this nonsense if they don't need that. That's a way of encouraging people to work out their divorces outside of the courtroom. The other way that it's really evolved is that it allows people to retain attorneys for a limited scope purpose or a limited scope retainer. You'll hear those words a lot, which allows people to just hire an attorney for the amount of advice they need. They don't have to hire an attorney to, take over their case and take it to divorce court. They can hire an attorney if they want to work it out on their own, but they still want to ask an attorney, hey, do you think this is wise, or am I doing something dumb here? Could you look over my agreement for me? they could just pay the attorney for a couple hours of time and save a lot of money. So the court system is always, of all the institutions we have, the least able to make change. But it is starting to change. And there is a great community of lawyers out there. People in Michigan can look at the Collaborative Practice Institute of Michigan for a listing of collaborative practice attorneys. These are attorneys who are, I think, going to agree with many of the things I said today about our court system and the way things should be. So there is a culture that is changing slowly. And that's really the reason why I am staying in this business, is because I want to be part of that change. Things change happens slowly sometimes, but I think it is starting to happen.
Well, I think if people like you who are so invested in seeing the change and educating and providing the resources and just getting people up to speed on everything, continue to do that, I think we will see that change. And I think that would really give a lot of hope to people, I think, who have to go through the process and maybe don't have to stress so much about it. That would be great. It would be a nice way to.
And it's working through the same way that collaborative practice works. In collaborative practice, oftentimes mental health professionals get involved in the process. Sometimes they even act as a neutral to kind of mediate a collaborative practice case if the couple's having trouble communicating. So there's a lot of mental health professionals who are now aware of collaborative practice and mediation. So that's another way that it's starting to spread. People will go to marriage counseling. Those marriage counselors will tell them about these methods. And so slowly but surely, through the process of working with people like you, Holly, or working with people who are in the mental health profession or in the financial section with CDFAs, word is getting out there. And so I do think it's that, networking like we're doing today that really helps to get the word out.
Absolutely. And then one more point on your website, I noticed we haven't talked about this yet. It says there's a do-it-yourself option. So I like the fact that you also have that listed. Tell me what that looks like.
Yeah, so some couples will want to do the divorce by themselves. They do the research, they figure out what forms they need for the most part, and they don't really have anything that they want to divide, or they've already agreed amongst themselves. And so sometimes I'll get phone calls from people saying, hey, I just need someone's help because I have to look at, I'm not sure I have the paperwork right. I just want to make sure this is right. Do I have everything listed here correctly? Do I have all the forms I need? Or, they want to ask me a question. I'm agreeing to, do this with the house. Am I doing this right? Am I not thinking through an issue? And so people will hire me in those situations, usually as either a neutral to work with both of them on that issue, or one of the spouses will hire me as a limited scope attorney, where they're just paying me for maybe an hour or two to look over a document. So that's another great way to reduce the cost of divorce, but get the amount of help that you think you need. It's another way of trying to improve the service by either reducing the cost or just, making the services that you give to people targeted.
Okay. And then Sean, I would love to hear like your thoughts on where you see yourself going with this, with maybe the next 5 years. Do you see this being, are you opening up to different aspects of law? Are you going to really grow this collaborative divorce process? Would love to hear your thoughts on your future and where you kind of want to take this.
I know. And to answer that question, I would love to sit down with someone with a crystal ball and help me with that very issue, because it's really hard to know. Currently I do a lot of different areas of law, but this is my passion project. Mm-hmm. This is something that, I feel I was, in some respects kind of made to do. And so it just suits me. So I'm in it because it's my passion. And wherever it goes, whether I'm helping 5 couples a year or whether that becomes 20, I'm ready for it. And so I'm pretty open to it. I'm very comfortable with where I'm at right now with my services and getting the word out. I want to, my vision would be to become a spokesperson for these methods. That's really what I would like to become, to be someone that can explain it in terms that help people understand what the court system's like, what these other methods are like, and what their options are, so we can really change the culture. And so that's, whether that makes me money or it just changes kind of our way of thinking about things, either one's rewarding.
Well, I can see you doing that, because I could feel your passion the first time we talked about your background with divorce. And we should point out that you've been happily married for a very long time. So you're an example of, marriage isn't easy, people will say, but you're an example of making it work. But I think that just hearing you talk about, wanting to see the education change, the process change, and really pull that stress, because it's got to be a lot to litigate divorce. I have friends who are divorce attorneys, and I know that it's hard. I remember going through mine, and I looked at my attorney. I'm like, how do you do this every day? And she said, well, it is a lot. She said, and your situation is, you've got a lot going on. But again, it's not my life, and I'm able to compartmentalize things. I think it takes a person that can do that, because it's definitely an arena where you probably have to put on the gloves and go into a different mindset, and not bring it home with you to your wife at night.
It is. I do a lot of litigation, Holly, but I don't do it in family law. I just will not litigate family law cases. I just never do. But I do a lot of litigation in my legal practice, and it is stressful. But thank God with families, we have a different way. We have a different method that we can do it, that we just can't do it when it comes to auto accidents and things of that nature, slip and falls. This family law has a better way of doing it. And so is it stressful to be a mediator? Yes. Is it stressful to do collaborative practice meetings? Sure. There's stress, there's emotion involved, but it's good stress because it's moving in the direction towards making the people resolve their disputes rather than inflame them further.
Right. Right. So in this process, if somebody's listening right now and they're just thinking, okay, what am I in for? What would you say maybe is the toughest part, or is something that people need to be aware of? Because obviously you're still getting divorced, right? You're not walking in. This isn't going to be Candyland. I'm dating myself with that game, right? People are gonna be like, what's Candyland?
Played it many a time.
Google it. Look it up. But it's not going to be a walk through the park. What would you say maybe the most challenging part of this process is when you're working with people?
Recognizing their own limitations. Knowing that you're someone who is, if you're a conflict avoider, how can we make this process work where you're sitting next to the person you're getting a divorce with? How can you make yourself heard? How can you make yourself feel like you're understood?
Right.
That's really important. And if you're someone who has a short temper, if you're someone who has, lacks some patience to sit through and listen to somebody, how can you make that work? What can we do to fix that so that the system might, or the collaborative practice process or mediations might work for you? So knowing your limitations and knowing that you're going into these meetings and also how you make decisions, I think is the other thing. Are you someone that makes a decision without needing someone to kind of say, yeah, I think this is a good idea? Some people need to have that kind of collaborative decision-making approach. I respect that.
Right.
I'm somewhat like that myself, but some people just can make decisions because they just know it's right and they're very independent thinkers. So knowing that is important as well. If you know those two things, then I think we can really, really get to a process or build a process for you that works, whether that's with an attorney by your side the whole time or whether or not that's, having an attorney on the side just to consult.
Right. Well, I mean, I think you've built a very strong case today, and you've, your website again, which will give some information on that. You even have the flow chart that shows your process, which I loved. I printed that out because I thought, I'm probably going to show this to people. It's a visual, and a lot of people like to see that in writing and see, oh, this is how this works, and other resources online. Is there any final thoughts that you might have that maybe we didn't cover, or anything you feel is really important for people to know?
I would say, I always get asked a question, so I guess I would say this about what does everything cost? What's the difference in the cost?
Right.
Yeah, right. So I always tell people that, mediation is usually going to be your less expensive option because, again, it's an a la carte approach. You can add in experts as needed. But if it's just me and a couple working some things out, you're just paying one professional to help you. If you're looking at the second highest or the second lowest, depending how you look at it, divorce method would be collaborative practice. Yeah, you're hiring your attorneys. Yes, you're having meetings with attorneys, but you're not going to court. And you're also, I always say that they're like, since they're trying to find a mutually acceptable resolution, they're getting to the point quicker and they're not letting arguments fester and grow out of control. I always say it's like forest fire containment with collaborative practice. There's going to be some money burned, but in a controlled area. And then litigation will almost always be more expensive for a number of reasons, most of which is the attorneys have to do everything for you and the court system with hearings and whatnot is involved. So people are always concerned about the cost. And so that's what I would highlight for people as well.
Okay. And I'm assuming they give you a retainer that's probably Is that how that goes?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yep. I usually try and tailor it around what's their case. I'm trying to get enough downstream with the case where I get enough money where I can do the work,
exactly.
knowing that it's going to at least cost me this much.
Right.
But make it affordable for people. So I try and, some people can pay some now, pay some later. I'm trying to be flexible with people with that. But yes, they'll pay a retainer, and which I'll charge against with an hourly fee.
And I want to bring this up because I think so many people don't understand, because obviously most people haven't been divorced multiple times. There are some people who have, but I hear people talk about, this attorney charges so much, and they go on and on and on. And then I'll say things like, well, what do they charge you for a retainer? And some of them are like 5,000 or less. And I'm like, how do you think that attorney is able to work and hire the people? They don't do all the work. They've got the junior attorneys, whatever, the paralegals who are doing a lot of the legwork, writing things up. There's still work that has to be done. So even in this process where it sounds like you're streamlining a lot, people have to understand that you do have, your time is worth something. You have the education to do this, and people are hiring you in anything, for your education, for your ability to get it done. Just because you can get it done faster doesn't mean that it's not worth what you're charging. So I think that's something people need to understand, that you've got a lot that's going on in the background that you have to get done. So you do have to charge for that. You do have to make your bills. You have to pay your overhead and your people. And obviously you deserve to get paid what you're worth. So I think that's something I want to highlight, which I'm sure you're not going to say, right? You're not going to say that, but I will say it plainly, that people need to understand, you get what you pay for in certain situations. So if you're finding some attorney, I'm not talking about you obviously right now, but it's taking some really low amount, but you're expecting him to move mountains for you. Like, we have to be realistic. There's a factor of, like, let's get realistic here. If you want,
Mm-hmm.
if you want the resolution and all the things that you've talked about today, that's worth paying for, because you're saving long term of having to be in the litigating process, which is going to cost not just money. Your time is worth something. We said time missed from work and all the things and the stress, that's worth something. And you're saving the time, coming to the table quicker and resolving it. So I just think I think everyone should at least attempt to look at this option, really and truly.
I agree. Retainers they're not estimates like you get if you get, your muffler replaced or,
Sure.
tires replaced. They're just how much money do you need to get some work done?
Mm-hmm.
But that's all it is. But the other thing too is that, make sure if you do ever hire a retainer that the retainer is fully refundable. Some attorneys will charge you a retainer that's not refundable. The minute you pay it, it's gone.
Right.
But make sure you get a refundable retainer. So you're only paying for, it goes into a trust account, and the attorney can only take that money out of the trust account if they've earned it through their hourly work. That's an important thing to consider.
Okay. And some maybe monthly statements, it'll show like what you've used to go towards
That's
that.
correct.
You get a statement at the end of the month if it didn't cover it, when you get
Correct.
to that point. So, okay. Well, that's good to know.
That's
I
right.
think that you've been, this has been, like I said, I knew it was going to be a great conversation. I knew that it was going to really provide what I think people need to know when they're walking into that realm of divorce. So I want to thank you again for joining me today, Sean, and sharing your expertise, your collaborative process to divorce in a much less stressful capacity. I'm sure our listeners are going to want to know more about how they can reach you. So please let us know the best way that we can get in touch with you.
Well, first of all, thanks, Holly, again for having me on. I appreciate you giving me a chance to spread the information to the people. If they want to learn more about what I do and the things we've talked about today, they can go to my website, which is Cleland Collaborative Divorce. .com. So it's right there. A lot of information on my website, and my email and contact information is there as well. So take a look there, and give me a call if you have any questions, or shoot me an email.
Perfect. And all of that is going to be down below in all of the information in our episode. And I do invite everyone to take a look at it. Now, not if you're not getting divorced, because I don't want you going online and then, your spouse gets on the computer and Google remembers what was last search. We don't want to freak your spouse out. So, but if it looks like you're going to go down that route, or maybe someone, I feel like, unfortunately, it's part of life. Please do send this information out to friends, family, or anyone who you think might be going down that road to divorce. You're going to be doing them a huge favor. They will appreciate you for doing that. And Sean and I just want to thank all of you for joining us today as well. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like our episode, and tap that bell for notifications so that you're first to know when the new episodes of the Onward and Upward podcast are posted. Everybody be blessed.